Hello, welcome everybody. I'm Sherry. I'm your hostess this evening with Midwest Women's Herbal. And if you'd like to put your name in the chat, maybe where you're coming from. Sometimes we've had some international guests, which is kind of fun to see, and maybe something that you're looking forward to learning tonight. So welcome everybody. We've got somebody from Massachusetts. Yep, that's kind of far away from a lot of us are in Wisconsin, the Midwest. I'm in Illinois. We've got Sadie from Wisconsin. So we'll let some of those. We've got more Wisconsin. We'll just let everybody kind of filter in here, and we'll see where that is. We've got Minnesota, lots of Wisconsin here. So Chicago, I see Iowa, yes, Dayton, Ohio, hot and humid, indeed, indeed. Atlanta, Georgia. So welcome everybody. Go ahead and keep putting that in the chat, and we can all check that out in a little bit. So welcome to Community Conversations produced by Midwest Women's Herbal. I'm Sherry Ralish. I'm your hostess this evening. In case you're not familiar with Midwest Women's Herbal, we're a women-led and women-empowered organization. We've been producing herbal and personal growth events, both in person and virtually, for over 14 years. To learn more, visit our website, Midwest Women's Herbal, or visit our classroom, herbwomenclassroom.com. We're delighted that you're with us for tonight's free community conversation, Growing Mushrooms in the Garden, with Ingrid Daudert and Linda Conroy. I'm happy to have some of the other coordinators here. It takes a strong village to produce these kind of events. So if you're one of the coordinators with Midwest Women's Herbal, go ahead and give a wave. And everybody, if you want to test your reaction button there and show a couple of claps or celebrations, a couple of hearts, we're glad that all of the coordinators are able to join us tonight. From our team, I'd like to introduce Courtney Hanson. She'll be handling tech support. So if you have any video or audio glitches, send her a private chat, or you can send an email to herbwomen@gmail.com. And we like to begin our events by reading our mission and our vision statement, and Courtney's going to do that for us tonight. So go ahead, Courtney.
Awesome. Thank you, Sherry, and welcome everybody. The Midwest Women's Herbal mission statement reads, Midwest Women's Herbal provides herbal education and opportunities for transformation. Immersed in the tradition of the village herbalist, grandmothers, mothers, daughters, sisters, and children gather in a co-created village. Through earth-centered healing and nourishment, we ally with the plants that grow around us. From the ground up, we connect to weave ourselves, our families, and our communities into the dynamic spiral of health. And the Midwest Women's Herbal Vision Statement reads, we live in the world where the feminine is honored and respected, where women stand fully in their power, acknowledging their wisdom, skills, and innate healing abilities.
Thank you, Courtney. So in the coming days, we'll be sending some emails with some special offers. We want to make sure that you receive them. So we know sometimes emails can go into spam. So to avoid this, you can add herbwomen@gmail.com to your contact list, or after you receive an email tonight, go ahead and hit the response, and then we can set up that connection. We'd like to take this opportunity to thank our sponsors who make hosting events like this possible: Moonwise Herbs, Mountain Rose Herbs, Host Defense Mushrooms, Goodland Creative, Herbs on the Side, Driftless Folk School, DNA Hemp, Wisconsin Mycological Society, Frontier Co-op, Herb Farm, Pacific Botanicals, and Natural Awakenings Magazine. If you're interested in learning about sponsorship opportunities, please visit MidwestWomen'sHerbal.com. And throughout the evening, Courtney's going to be putting links in the chat, and that will be the same thing throughout tonight's call. So if we mention any resources, we'll be putting those in the chat, and we will include anything in a follow-up email after tonight's event. We're super excited and thrilled to announce that registration is open for the 9th annual Mycelium Mysteries, a women's mushroom conference. Join us for a transformative weekend where fungi and the feminine meet from September 19th through the 21st at the beautiful Wisconsin, we're at Camp Helen Brockman. And so we've got the main conference for that weekend, but we have a variety of pre-conference events We have a 3 hour foray, which is a mushroom walk, if you're not familiar with a foray, and Rose Tercey is going to be teaching that. She's been a keynote speaker and hosts a lot of workshops and teaches at our conferences. Rose is very fun, knowledgeable, and has all kinds of information like which states have state mushrooms and other fun facts. So check that out. We have a full day pre-conference workshop, Energetics for Magic and Everyday Life with Ruth Baird and Falcon River. We've got a certified mushroom identifier being taught by Melissa Klotka and Emily May King. That's a full day event as well. And one of our keynote speakers, Barbara, um, her last name, but Linda, help me with her last name. I think I wrote it down wrong. I have it but the Batoka, and that's not right. We'll get that in the chat.
Radicova, I think it is.
Thank you. I messed up my notes there. I knew it wasn't right. So she
It's
was on.
not an easy one to pronounce.
Thank you. So Barbara was on our most recent community conversation, and we'll put that in the chat. So if you missed that last one, that's another one to watch that's going to give you information about the upcoming Mycelium Mysteries. So do check out Mycelium Mysteries. We hope you join us for that. At Midwest Women's Herbal, we believe learning should be accessible year-round. We bring a variety of virtual learning experiences directly to you, and you can find that at our Herb Women classroom. So you can have on-demand workshops. You can look for past recordings from the past Mycelium Mysteries, the Spring Conference, the In Our Own Hand series. And we've been loading up a bunch of individual workshops, a lot of mushroom content. So you can take a look there at any time. We also launched a membership, a community membership with the Herb Women Classroom. So you can join us monthly for that, and you can get modules and all kinds of other access to other material. So you can visit that at the herbwomenclassroom.com. Let's see. So with some of the modules that you get at the Herb Women Classroom and the community membership, there's a live Q&A session with Linda Conroy, and we've just changed the format of that. I just want to mention it briefly in case anybody that's in the classroom or on the community membership is there. We're going to change the format to a half-hour presentation followed by a Q&A, and Linda's going to talk about stressless botanicals. And so that's going to happen Wednesday night. If you're in that program, you're invited to that. So if you want to learn more, send us an email, put it in the chat. We can send you more information. We've recently concluded the spring conference with keynote speakers Robin Wall Kimmerer, Cornelia Cho, and Gail Faith Edwards, and that full recording package is available at the Herb Women Classroom now. So our guest Ingrid will be introduced in a few moments. So in the meantime, I'd like to share at the end of tonight's conversation, you'll have the opportunity to win a mushroom conference or a mushroom apron, access to one of our online modules, more fungal fundamentals, or there's a pre-conference workshop that Ingrid's teaching that Linda and Ingrid will talk about, and we're giving away a registration to a 3 hour conference, pre-conference introduction to mushroom cultivation that will be on that Friday morning. So you need to be present to win, so be sure to stay to the end of the program tonight. So at this time, I'm honored to introduce Linda Conroy. Linda is the owner and proprietress of Moonwise Herbs. She's the founder of the Midwest Women's Herbal Conference, Mycelium Mysteries, the In Our Own Hand series. She's been practicing and teaching herbalism for over 30 years. I met Linda, geez, over 10 years ago at an event and then came to the conference. I've apprenticed with Linda, and I've really enjoyed learning from her, and I've joined the coordinating team and really excited to be part of this and in service, and was inspired to join the team and really hold women's space through a lot of the apprenticeship learning and internship that I spent with Linda. So really thrilled to introduce Linda Conroy tonight. Welcome, Linda.
Thank you, Shari. And thank you for hosting and for sharing all that information with us. It's always you hear it all and it's a lot, but it's really exciting how much education and information and community that we're holding. So thanks for helping to hold that space.
You're
Super
welcome.
appreciated. And thanks again to everybody else who's on the call, who's a team member. We have, as Shari said, it takes a village to continue to offer these events. We offer these free community conversations at pretty much at least every other month. I think we've been doing them, sometimes a little more often. And we have a whole slew of them on our website that you can find out about. And we can put the link in the classroom. So there's all kinds of topics from mushrooms to fermentation to liminal space and all kinds of herbal topics as well. So I'm really excited to be here tonight and want to welcome everyone. And we're going to be speaking about gardening with mushrooms. And I am super lucky and super honored to be here with Ingrid Daudert tonight. And Ingrid is also a part of my community. She lives very close to where I live, and we have collaborated on a lot of different activities and events related to mushrooms. And I am always inspired by her knowledge, especially about growing mushrooms and about soil. She's very knowledgeable about soil. And so I'm super excited about talking with her tonight and having her share some of that information. And Ingrid is really dedicated to growing mushrooms and to making mushrooms available and making it easy for other people to grow them as well. She's very generous in that way. I really appreciate that about Ingrid. And I want to read her bio because half the time, if I try to just share off the top of my head, I'll miss something. So I'm going to read her bio so that you have more information about Ingrid. Ingrid Daughter was bitten by the mycophile bug when her grandfather taught her foraging in Germany. Ingrid worked for UW Cooperative Extension, teaching conservation practices for farmers, where she learned about soils as living ecosystems rather than just dirt. She started Misty Dawn Farm, LLC, in 2013 near Hillsboro, Wisconsin. Ingrid is also the president of the Shiitake Growers Association. Her vision for the Shiitake Growers Association is to increase awareness of the health benefits of mushrooms, encourage more farmers to incorporate mushrooms into their production repertoire, and mentor new mushroom growers. And I know that there's a lot more. Ingrid has a degree in fisheries biology, and she also now has relocated her farm, and she now also has a farm where she also is producing maple syrup and growing mushrooms. So I want to welcome Ingrid to the space. Welcome, Ingrid.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Mhm. Yeah, it's really great to be here with you. And it's been such a delight to work with you, both have you teach at Mycelium Mysteries every single year, I believe. Is that that's the case? And I know you and I have taught some workshops together, and I've spent some time out at your farm. And, it's just so inspiring to see you growing mushrooms on a really nice scale and growing them outdoors. I know we've talked a lot about this, that growing them outdoors has so many benefits. And tonight, our focus is on growing mushrooms in the garden. And I'm wondering if you could just start out by telling us a little bit more how you got inspired to actually grow mushrooms on your farm, and then also specifically in your garden.
Okay. So, well, thank you for having me. And it's been a long, convoluted journey. I started growing mushrooms because, as Linda mentioned, we had 50 acres in Vernon County, out by Hillsboro, and we had signed up for a tax program through the DNR, which gave us a tax break, but it required that we had to do a timber harvest. It's called the Managed Forest Law Program. And what it does is it basically defers your taxes until you have a logging operation on your farm. So we did a logging, and what I was disappointed about was that the loggers usually take all the big stuff and then they leave the tops of the trees everywhere. And so I was like, well, what, besides just cutting it up for firewood, it just seemed like such a waste to have these beautiful oak trees. I said, well, what else could we do? And so I started researching what, other options we had, because I'm really into regenerative agriculture and also food forest farming. And so we really got interested in the fact that these log grown shiitakes would be a perfect avenue for us to get into. So that's what we did. I started researching it, and I went actually out to Washington to study with Paul Stamets. He offers classes on, on growing mushrooms, on the whole process. And I was fortunate enough to get into one of his classes and learn about it. And he's also very forthright in saying that he stands on the shoulders of a lot of other teachers, and I feel like I'm standing on his shoulders and passing it forward to all of you. So I feel very fortunate. So that was how we got into it initially. Was we started to cut up the logs and started growing log-grown shiitake mushrooms. And the more I learned about it, the more I found that it was really such a wonderful way to give back, to not waste the trees and the life of the tree, and to create food from that log, and to create and shiitake mushrooms are such a wonderful food source. So, and we'll talk about that probably a little bit later in the talk. But that's how I got interested in it, and that's how I got started in it. But mushrooms have always sort of been on the edge of my periphery. As you mentioned, my grandfather took me on long woodland walks, and I was fascinated by woodland ecology. And so now I have the opportunity, having this agroforestry farm in Janesville, to really implement a lot of those kind of practices on my farm.
So, it's so often when we're in these fields or doing this work for a long time, we use terms that people might not always understand. So
Yes.
what I was thinking when you utilize the term regenerative and then agroforestry, and I know that isn't our topic tonight necessarily, but could you give a short definition of those two things? Because I don't think everybody always knows what that is. And I think it's really helpful for us to know. It's an important field of
Sure.
exploration.
Yeah, so regenerative agriculture, or regeneration, basically is how to look at things in a way that creates more benefit, that actually heals the earth and heals the soil and heals our ecosystems. So, instead of being consumptive like regular agriculture is, where we're just, losing soil at a rapid rate, where we're degrading the soils biomes because we're tilling it and things like that. We're looking at regenerating the soil in a way that makes it more productive, but by doing things that heal it. And so that's kind of what regenerative agriculture is. And agroforestry is sort of an umbrella term. It's looking at forest systems as an agricultural product. So instead of just having our forests be, these natural ecosystems, many farmers have properties or have areas where they might want to consider doing some type of a commodity crop. So, for instance, maple syruping is an agroforestry crop. There are four categories, or actually I think five, that fall under agroforestry. One is riparian buffers, which means that if there's a river, we're using agriculture or forest systems to sort of those riverine ecosystems and create buffers from agricultural impacts. The other one is windbreaks, where we're using trees to create windbreaks, so that the winds don't slow down, and things don't erode so rapidly. Another one is alley cropping, which is you use trees on the outside and you grow them. And as they're growing, you grow crops in between. And eventually the trees grow large enough and become productive that they become the crop, like hazelnuts or chestnuts or cherries and other things like that. But in the meantime, you might be doing um, say for instance, asparagus or other things in the middle. And eventually you might do raspberries or currants or other things as as the trees grow and create more shade. Um, and then what I do primarily is a food forest, where I'm looking at my trees as a canopy, and then I'm growing other things underneath it. So the shiitake mushrooms are one of the food forest things. Doing woodland herbals is another. Doing orchards where you're growing, and I know you do this on your farm, where you have the trees, and then you grow maybe comfrey or currants or other things under those apple trees, and then maybe even
And
mushrooms.
wine cap mushrooms.
Wine cap mushrooms, yes. So we'll talk about that when we're talking more about gardening. But
Yeah.
yeah, and how those all work together and help to create ecosystems. So that, like for instance, it's a term, and I'll create a term: integrated pest management, and it's called IPM. And that's where you might have a large tree, and you might have kinglets or other birds that nest and feed on insects in that upper area. And then you might have something more like a robin, which is a ground bird, and you might have another bird that feeds in the middle. And you're using these assemblages of different kinds of plants to encourage different kinds of predators and birds to grow. And then they eat the insects and pests that are going to impact your trees and things that are your fruit trees. So it's a really wonderful system, and that's a food forest. So those are sort of some of the things that we use in agroforestry. Sorry, that was a longer explanation than you probably wanted, but it's hard to do that in this such a big, broad topic.
Well, that was a good explanation, and it made me start thinking. I'm like, well, that means the garden is a lot broader than we might think, right?
Yeah, we
Because
kind of always
we
think of
might think,
tomatoes, yeah, in a row, and we don't always think of how everything could be so much more vertical, not just horizontal.
yeah, yeah, but and broader, I mean, going out into the forest, like that becomes your garden, right? You're
Yes,
actually engaging with it in a way that is intended to create health and create a robust space where food can be produced or medicine can be produced, etc. So in that, what do you think the role is of mushrooms in the smaller and larger garden? Like what role does mushroom, you're talking about trees and and well I think those of us who are familiar with the mushroom world are familiar with the concept that a lot of mushrooms have a symbiotic relationship with trees. Do you want to start there, talk about mushrooms' relationship to trees and then to other plants?
sure. So yeah, one of the wonderful things, there's a lot of different kinds of mushrooms, and there's those that are symbiotic. There's also parasitic mushrooms, and then there's the lichens, which are the the relationship between an algae and a mushroom, or a mycelium. And I use mushroom interchangeably, but really the mushroom is actually the fruit, and the mycelium is actually the plant itself. So you'll have to forgive me if I say mushroom, and
Well,
most of the
I think you have to explain what mycelium is then.
time. Yeah. So mycelium is basically the root of the mushroom, and it lives in the soil, or it lives in an organism. And then when it wants to reproduce, it creates the fruit, which is actually the mushroom. So like an apple tree creates the apple. So I think of it that way. So, and there are so many mushrooms. We don't even know all the different mushrooms that there are out there. We're just starting to scratch the surface. And that's when I'm talking to young people all the time, I'm always saying, become a mycologist. There is job security in that, because there's so much we don't know, and that's so much that we still need to learn. But the mycelium, which lives usually in the soil or on the tips of the roots of plants, or in the plant, or in the tree, or in us, we have a lot of fungus that lives in us as well, that we forget about. And one of the talks I'll give at the Mycelium Mysteries is a talk about sort of this bigger overview, and much more in depth than we're going to get into it in this little snippet of time we have tonight. But yeah, so basically, the mycelium lives in the soil, and it's there, all the time, and it's creating this network, this root system, basically, that knits our soil together, and keeps it from washing away, and keeps it from, basically, and it feeds things, and it also feeds on other things. So it's this whole ecosystem that we're not even aware of under our feet. And if anybody has a chance to see the movie Fantastic Fungi, it really shows that very nicely in a real visual way. But so basically, when we're talking about gardening and about our soil health, uh, keeping our soils with that mycelium in there. And a lot of you might have noticed, if you have mulch in your garden, if the mulch has been around for a while and you kind of move it, you'll see a lot of white kind of stringy stuff that's attached to it. That's the mycelium. And the mycelium is basically breaking down that wood, in your garden beds, and it's there all the time. And then when it fruits, oh, I'm getting some feedback all of a sudden. Then we end up getting, that's what we eat. Those are the things, the fruiting body, the mushroom. So things like the wine caps, the morels that everybody's crazy about, all those sorts of things. And let's see, I'm trying to think if I've covered everything basically without going into too much detail.
Well, could you just say a couple things about what the mycelium, the interaction between the soil and the trees, like there's a communication system there, and
Mhm.
what really has struck me over the years, getting more awareness about this, is that communication is critical to the health of the whole entire ecosystem. And of course, our conventional agriculture destroys that. And so it pretty much, makes what we're growing not as nutritious, not as healthy. And, there's a lot of issues there. But when the mycelium is there, can you just talk a little bit about the interactions and how critical it is to the system?
Sure. So the mycelium basically, if the plants are feeding sugars to the mycelium, and the mycelium are feeding the minerals and other things. So mycelium will break down the soil, the minerals in the soil, and feed it to the plants. So it's a two-way system. And having good healthy mycelium and good healthy soil also makes those trees more drought resistant, more disease resistant. The mycelium acts as basically the internet of our environment. So a plant can communicate through the mycelium to other plants. It can feed other plants. I know, when Susan Simrad talked about the mother tree, when a tree is dying, it can actually send nutrients down into its young, and give it the life force to those young saplings. And it's not always species specific. In real ecosystems where you have like an aspen tree and you have a conifer, that aspen is very water dense, and it can feed water to the conifers during periods of drought. So it's a network that is really important. And when we disturb the soil, especially when in conventional agriculture, one of the things that I hate is going around and seeing these farmers who, people who like really pristine lawns with nothing in it, farmers like pristine dirt with nothing in it, not a weed, not anything. And what they've done is they've basically tilled the soil to the point where they've aerated the soil, solarized the soil, and now the mycelium has died. Because this basically, when we talk about the care of mycelium in the logs, it's, don't let your logs dry out, protected from wind, protected from intense sun, all that sort of thing. And here's what we've done to our soil. So unfortunately, that ends up meaning that we have to put more fertilizer in the soil. We have to put more chemicals in the soil, more lime, or all the things that we have to add to the soil to make it not dirt. I mean, when we talk about dirt versus soil, dirt is inert and soil is alive. I mean, there are so many organisms in a teaspoon of dirt. I mean, they talk about billions of bacteria, mycelium, and nematodes, and all of those organisms that are just in a little teaspoon. And we think of it as being inert, and it's not. I've given a talk at Mycelium Mysteries before about the skin of Gaia, basically the skin of our earth, and what we have to do to our skin and how we have to treat the skin of our planet is very similar. We have to, nurture it and moisturize it and take care of it.
So somebody was asking in the chat about adding bokashi, if that is something that would be helpful to the trees, and that's a fermented product or a fermented process that acts as a fertilizer. And somebody was asking if that would be helpful to the trees.
I don't know a lot about that product, so I can't really say that it would be or wouldn't be. I would think though that, anytime you can give something back to the plants that, is beneficial, that, breaks down the nutrients and things, just like for us, fermented foods that is really good for our biome. I can make an assumption that it might be, but I can't speak to that directly because
Right.
I don't know.
Well, and I think what we're talking about, this topic, and just kind of get more specific with our gardening with mushrooms, is that, you can add fermented products and you can add any kind of product to the soil as an amendment. But what I think you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that if you have a lot of mycelium in your garden and in your forest, that's going to all be happening naturally. That it's going to be moved around on its own. You don't really have to have that extra additional input. You can give it, but if you really create a rich environment in the soil with all the microbes and and the fungi, that's going to happen naturally, and that you don't really have to put a whole lot of amendments or input in to the soil. Is that, I mean, is that correct?
Well, it depends on your soil. And so, I would definitely, if you have soil that you're not sure about or that you think might be deficient in nutrients, the extension offers, you can buy like a small bag and you can take a soil sample, send it in, and they will tell you what your soil is like and what its composition is. So we have areas where very sandy soils, we have very, clay soils. So all the soils are very different. And so some soils might benefit from some amendments, and it depends on what you want to grow. If you want to grow some things, you might need to add lime, or you might need to, and compost is always a good thing to add because, it does feed the biome of everything. So the bacteria, the nematodes and all that. So, I don't see that is a problem to add things like that. But I do think that looking at the health of your soil and keeping your soil, where you start to see the mycelium in your soil and you've got a good, healthy soil, you'll see that your plants will do well. We'll talk a little bit about agaricus, almond agaricus, and growing it with tomatoes. And when you plant the two together, you'll see a much healthier tomato plant because the mushroom itself is providing the minerals to the plant, it's providing moisture to the plant, and it's the you don't see the rot and some of the other problems that you see in tomato plants when you grow it, symbiotically with the mushroom. And as you know, because we planted wine caps around your apple trees,
Yeah,
we saw an improvement in your apple trees. Just the lushness and the health of the leaves and everything. Just within a year or so, the trees were just so much happier.
absolutely. And I guess that was what my point was, is that if you are cultivating and getting the mycelium to grow, eventually you're going to have this system that's going to be very tending to itself
Yes.
over time. So we have a question that gets right to the heart of the matter, and you've started to go there, so it's perfect timing. And Jennifer says it's chanterelle season in the forests of North Minnesota, and it is. I actually spent my afternoon peckling chanterelle mushrooms, so that was delightful. And so Jennifer continues with, what are good mushrooms to encourage or cultivate in the woods, as well as, or versus, a traditional garden or a small city urban garden? So
Okay.
maybe you could talk a little bit more, be more explicit about what you just said about the agaricus, and then maybe talk about a couple other mushrooms that people might consider planting in their space or
Yeah.
introducing.
Yeah. So in a woodland situation, they'll naturally, find their space, just like plants. They'll choose, where they want to grow and things like that. But in a garden situation, you might want to look at, you know, you need to look at your space, and you need to see, is it a very sunny space? Is it a very shady space? Do you have area or pockets that are moist, and maybe a large tree that you can incorporate, where you wouldn't be able to maybe have a vegetable garden, but you might be able to do a mushroom garden per se. So different mushrooms like different things. I mentioned the agaricus mushroom, which is basically a variety of button mushroom, and that one does like to grow in. It can grow in a greenhouse situation. It can grow, in like a hoop situation. So you can plant it earlier, but it likes the heat. And so when the tomatoes start to grow and produce, that's when you'll also start to see that mushroom coming in. And that's a compost-based mushroom. So it likes manure. It likes the straw or some type of a mulch on top just to keep the moisture in. And I usually put something down first, like a cardboard or some newspaper or something that will degrade over time, but it'll give the mushroom a chance to take off. And that's an annual, so it will not come back year after year after year. So that's one that I like if you're going to do a row and you're going to do a typical, sunny spot tomato garden. The
Can I
wine
just ask you a question about that? Um, because I know it won't come back in the immediate space, but the spores sometimes spread around and it'll come back somewhere else. Because I had it, we planted it under my tomatoes, and then last year, and then this year it came up in my they came up in my chicken yard. So
yeah.
they move around.
Well, and that's just it. And we do have to be careful because, when we're doing stuff like this, like I know we've had this talk about oyster mushrooms, golden oysters, and they can become invasive. But oyster mushrooms are such an easy one to grow. So, and it's a lovely one that you can container grow. I like growing it in kitty litter containers and stacking them up and having the mushrooms come out of the holes in the kitty litter container. So you can get a little vertical interest with oyster mushrooms. But you do have to be careful because that one is starting to naturalize in our environment. So, when and shiitakes is one that's from China and Japan. It's the mushroom that I grow. It has not naturalized yet. But with climate change and all the other things that are happening in our world, who's to say what's going to happen in the future. So, and I do, I'll use this time now to give my little plug for the difference between an outdoor grown mushroom and an indoor grown mushroom. This is my soapbox. I do not grow mushrooms indoors. I grow all my mushrooms outdoors. I grow them on logs, my shiitakes, because I believe that the mushrooms are more robust. I call them my bodybuilder mushrooms, and the ones that grow indoors on these sawdust blocks are, I call them the couch potato mushroom, because they're not having to work as hard on breaking down the materials, because all the materials are already broken down for them in those blocks. But I also recommend not growing mushrooms indoors. Um, there and two reasons for that. One is the spores get into our ventilation system and then we're breathing them in. And then the other reason is because we don't have, the mushrooms aren't getting the sunlight, they're not having to work as hard. And so you're not getting the same nutritional value that you would on an indoor grown one. But you can take your indoor grown mushrooms and take them outside and at least let them experience some sunlight before you eat them, so that the vitamin D content is higher. But the vitamin D content between an outdoor grown and an indoor grown one is like 100 times different. So it's huge.
Well, and I don't even think it's just a belief. All you have to do is look at them. The log-grown shiitakes are meaty and dense, and the ones grown on, the sawdust logs or the blocks are, a lot more spindly, and they're not as robust. You can literally see it. So I totally concur with you. That's why I started inoculating more shiitake logs so I could have them here. Have that, deeper nutrition. And plus, as a chef, they're much nicer to cook with. You can make more diverse food preparations. So there's
Yeah,
so many reasons why that's, yeah, I totally agree with you on that.
yeah.
Aaron was asking, and this kind of takes us in a little bit of a different direction, but in the same genres. Are there any particular mushrooms that are beneficial to stressed old oak trees?
Stressed old oak trees. You mean like with the wilt disease or things like that? Um,
Aaron, is that what you're talking about? Yes, she says.
yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, for a lot of when you're using the wood from any of the trees, we cut live wood and we cut it in the winter time so that it is so that the bark is intact. What happens with diseased trees is the bark usually is no longer much intact. A lot of times it sloughs off. A lot of times there's the beetles that get underneath, like in the ash, and it basically kills the wood and makes the log not as viable for the whatever species you're going to be putting into that log. Um, and so it's not as conducive. If you have it, it's free. You can try it, but it's not, the log probably won't last as long. Plus, the oak wilt is a fungus, and so you're going to have a fungus competing with another fungus. And some funguses are much more aggressive than other mushroom, uh, mycelium. So, like when I talk about in my classes about the war of the fungi, and I talk about turkey tail versus the shiitake, if the log has been sitting around a long time and it's already sort of been contaminated by turkey tail, the turkey tail will outcompete the shiitake, and you'll have a lovely turkey tail log, but the shiitake will probably not produce. So there's a hygiene to that, and come to my class, my pre-conference class, and we'll talk a lot about this because I'll have 3 hours to talk about that. But and all the different about the different tree species and which mushrooms grow on different tree species and all that. There's a lot to it, and there's a lot to learn. But it's
So I
really
think the question, actually, I don't know that I was clear, but I think the question is, could you, like, if you have stressed older oak trees, could you introduce mushrooms that would help
oh to
into
help.
the environment, that would help support and revitalize the oak trees.
Yeah. I know that on some that there are some things you can do. I don't know of any mushroom species that will outcompete the wilt. Um, I think that's, unfortunate, but like with the beetles and stuff too, there's poisons that will do it, but I haven't heard of any research that gets into that yet. And that's a little bit out of my band um, reel. So but I'll definitely look into it and see if I can maybe in in the chat or whatever that there's going to be posted. Maybe I can find out for you and put that in the saved.
Yeah, if you
Um,
have any, if you do get any information, we can send it in a follow-up. So
yeah,
I am noticing we are talking away, and our time is going quickly. So I want to you could just bring us. Well, we have a couple questions that I'll get to in a minute. So hold tight, people. But I want to just talk about specifically, since we wanted to talk about gardening with mushrooms, and all of this information is such good information to lay the groundwork for the for gardening with mushrooms. And I know we talked about agaricus, and you briefly mentioned wine caps, but I think that it would be good to talk a little bit more about wine caps and planting those, because that is a great one for many places where you can grow those, and you can grow them in any environment. So do you want to talk about those and their needs, and where you might want to lay the spore down for those?
sure. So wine cap is a quick growing mushroom, and it's a beautiful mushroom. Um, it grows around, it likes a variety of areas. I mean, Linda grows it under her apple trees, and it's relatively sunny. I've donated my hosta a lot of different variety of places. It likes mulch. So we usually we do what's called the lasagna technique, where you put a layer of cardboard, you put a layer of spawn, then you put a layer of straw mulch, which the straw gives it a lot of surface area to colonize. In between each one, you water it, and then you do that like 3 or 4 times, and then you cap it with a wood mulch to keep the moisture in. And that you can grow those in a lot of different areas. I mean, there's a lot of other, and we mentioned the the oysters. You can grow those in bags. You can grow those in containers. A lot of people will even grow those in laundry baskets because they kind of come out in all the different holes there, which is really kind of cool. And then the other ones you can do are what's called totems, which if you have an area where you want to grow, like something that's a little more vertical and you have a larger diameter tree, um, stumps and stuff, you can layer them and do what's called a sort of a peanut butter approach. You just lather on the mycelium, the spawn, and then you stack it and cover it so that it doesn't dry out, and then in a couple of weeks or months you uncover it and then it starts fruiting, so you get a nice visual. And you can do reishi that way, you can do lion's mane. There's a lot of different mushrooms that you can do that way too. There the decomposers usually like to grow on wood. So that one, and then the compost ones, like to grow on manure and other sorts of compost. And then, of course, there, as I mentioned, there's the parasitic ones and stuff like that too. So there's different groups of mushrooms. The ones that everybody always asks me about growing are the morels and things like that. Those are a little harder to grow because they're a two-stage mushroom. They have a life cycle that's a little more complex. But I know Linda, we took some ash from her fire pits and spread it in a slurry with the morel spawn, and we're going to wait and see if that actually takes off. So because they're growing really well out west where there've been fires. There's morels are growing everywhere where there've been fires. So
And mine didn't come up, but hopefully next year. But I did meet someone who did the same thing on their property, and they got 5 morels. So
okay.
there's hope. So a couple of things I want to I'm going to try to consolidate some of these questions because we're definitely covering a lot, and we're going to use up all our time here. But I think another term that we request was to define spawn, because not everybody is going to know what spawn is. So again, if we could give the short definition of what spawn is, that would be super
I don't know.
helpful.
I don't know if I know how to do anything small or short. I'll try. So basically, spawn is the mycelium that. So basically, in the life cycle of a mushroom, you have the spores that then create what's called hyphae, and the hyphae create the mycelium, and then the mycelium create the mushroom over time. So basically, it's the spores that have come together and created sort of that hyphae, and it's in a matrix of the usually sawdust. It's sterile, and it's been put in there, to grow. And then once that's grown, then you take that and then you basically, it's like seed stock. You're seeding from that. So that's what spawn is basically. It's a
So it's
seed.
basically the seed stock for the mushroom.
Yes.
Yes. And if you purchase spawn, there's different places where you can purchase spawn, and you usually will get instructions on what the best way to cultivate that spawn is that you're working with.
Yeah.
So then I don't think we want to get into this majorly, but someone was asking about growing mushrooms in plastic. Wouldn't it leach the plastic chemicals? And I don't think we want to get into that majorly, because that is definitely about mycoremediation and having that conversation, because it's really interesting that mushrooms can actually convert those chemicals, and the chemicals don't have, a lot of times when they do mycoremediation, the chemicals aren't even in the mushrooms at the end of the day. So that's an interesting question Laura asked, and I think it's a longer conversation, but I didn't want to ignore it either. Did you have a
Yeah.
word or two to say about that?
Yeah.
Again,
Mushrooms decompose everything to simple carbons. So they can take radioactive material and break it down into carbon. They can take plastic, they can take oils, they can take everything and break it down to the carbon level. So that's why it doesn't bioaccumulate in mushrooms the way that it would, in other organisms.
right. Although I do think it's a bigger conversation to have about should we grow mushrooms in plastic or not. And thank you for the question. And I think that's why we have a whole conference focused on mushrooms. You can see how many topics there's so many things to cover when you're talking about mushrooms.
Yeah, it
So
is. It's a
um,
huge topic.
yes, it is. It's a huge topic. So somebody else wanted tips on best logs to inoculate for shiitakes. Um, uh, she's saying pine is what they grow on naturally, and when do you inoculate? Any time of the year, or there better times? So, if you
So
could just
pine is
name.
not, yeah, not a favorite of shiitake.
Mhm.
Fluid and Namako and others will grow on pine, but that's why I grow most of my shiitakes under pine, because it acts as a natural barrier to other diseases and other mushrooms. So oak is the preferred wood for shiitake, although it will grow on other trees as well. So, and the softer the wood, the faster it'll produce mushrooms, and the harder the wood, the longer. So, a red oak, or I'm sorry, red maple, 6 months you'll get a mushroom off of it. An oak, 12 months, and an ash or a hickory, 3 years. So be very patient if you're going to inoculate in hickory or ash.
But the one thing is, if you're patient, those logs are going to last a lot longer. I mean, you'll have them for many years, maybe 10, 15 years. You'll be getting fruiting mushrooms from them. So that's the benefit of that, right? Yeah. So also Gina attended the mushroom workshop recently, and she said since you brought up the kitty litter bucket, she realized she forgot when she needs to
Oh,
open the holes in the bucket. Can you remind her?
You just need to open up your lid and look and see if the mycelium have started to grow on the straw. And if it has, then you can open up your holes and they should start to fruit. If they haven't, either make sure that it's moist still, if you haven't dried out your bucket. And if you see anything green in it, you've got um, a mold issue growing. So then it's probably not going to do much at this point.
So basically, if she sees the white mycelium, then she can open the holes
Yes.
because
Yeah.
then it'll be ready to start fruiting.
Yeah. And I think early in this, I also saw somebody asked about how to best refrigerate your mushrooms, and always in a paper bag. Even the ones you buy at the grocery store, take them out of plastic, throw them in a paper bag, because they breathe and they will last a lot longer. A shiitake mushroom will last weeks in the refrigerator, in a paper bag. Oyster
Yes,
mushroom.
don't put them in plastic.
Yeah. I mean, different mushrooms have different shelf lives. So, oyster mushrooms have a very short shelf life. And that's one of the reasons I like to grow shiitakes and not oysters, because I don't have a clientele that I can sell oysters to quick enough.
So, I would just wanted to reiterate a little bit. We talked about growing like agaricus in the garden, wine caps, and growing oysters in these different ways. One of the things I also love to do is take my spent older shiitake logs and use them to frame out my garden beds. And that's really nice because that contributes to the soil, and then every once in a while a mushroom pops out. So that's another way that you can bring the mushroom energy and mushrooms into your garden, as well. Do you have any other quick tips like that that you might want to impart to people as we kind of come to a close with our conversation?
I also use mine for paths and for, along the areas where I need to, shore up. Like I use them on the edge of my chicken coop. And actually, I just had some oysters growing out of one of my logs, right next to my chicken coop. I also do what's known as a Hugelkugel, and that's it's a permaculture technique where you take your logs and you stack like four on the bottom, then three, then two, then one, and then you can cover it with straw and compost, and you can grow other mushrooms in it, or you can grow your tomato plants and things in a higher level. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff that you can do. There's so many things you can do with growing mushrooms. They'll grow in almost anything. There's you can take some burlap and take a little compost and create these nice little decorative things and put them in. Maitake likes to grow in wafers that you bury in the soil. There's just so many things you can do with mushrooms in your garden, that are just so creative and just add another element. And the mushrooms themselves have such nutritional value, and they're such a good prebiotic that we should be eating, as you say, mushrooms with almost every meal.
With every meal. And that's such a good reason to grow them, right? Is to have them right there so you can eat them. And if you grow them in the early spring, now that I have a rotation of shiitakes, I have shiitakes pretty much throughout the year. I'll, get fruitings. And then you'll have, in the summer, your wine caps are going to come up and your agaricus. And then in the fall, if you have matakis, the matakis are going to be there. And so you can have mushrooms popping up every season, and it's easy to eat them with every meal if you have them in your environment. And one of the things I've noticed is that the more mushrooms I put in my environment, the more mushrooms show up in my environment.
Oh, yeah.
So that's been really the diversity of the mycelium. And I know, we talk a lot, like you said, about discouraging things like golden oysters because they tend to be more aggressive, and it appears that they probably are crowding out the mushrooms that are native to our region. Um, and I'm seeing a lot of diversity even in mushrooms that are native showing up in my environment now that I've introduced, for the past 6 years, a lot of mushrooms into my environment. Um, I don't know if you want to say a couple things about that, but it's just fascinating.
Well, they do work mutualistic with each other. They, so I have the same thing. I mean, you see them growing in your lawns, you see, like puffballs and all the other stuff. And when you create a habitat, you know, when the soil itself is more open.
Well, you're muted, Ingrid.
How did that happen? Sorry.
I don't know,
Uh,
but you have to start over.
yeah, I didn't hit anything. I didn't so anyway, basically we're creating habitats where it makes it more conducive for other mushrooms to come in, just like, more bacteria and more of the things that eat the mycelium and other things that, so it creates a habitat that makes the more diversified mushrooms come in. So and some will outcompete each other, but for the most part it creates um, the amount of moisture that is retained in soil because of mushrooms, makes it more conducive to other mushrooms. So, I yeah,
Yeah,
I don't know what
it's just
about
so
that.
fascinating.
Yeah, I
So,
just
there is
habitat.
a question. Go ahead,
Okay.
say that again. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, and this year, because of all the rain we've been having, and it's been so humid, I've just seen mushrooms everywhere. And yeah, it's been a bumper year for all different species of mushrooms.
Yeah, I've had some pop up in my space that I hadn't seen before, so that's like just amazing.
Yeah.
So this is another question that is definitely beyond the scope of our time, but I do just want to give it a little bit of attention. And Lori, we've had whole workshops on this topic, so it'd be hard to cover it entirely. But she says, if there is some fungi in logs already, can you still use them to inoculate? Um, and so the answer really is no for the most part, but if you want to say something about that.
Yeah, I think I already mentioned that about the turkey tail versus the shiitake. Um, it's I really talk about hygiene of my logs, and I don't let my logs touch the ground. Because if they're resting on the ground, all the mycelium and other things that are in the ground can get into the log and contaminate it. I also don't let my logs sit for years before I inoculate. I try to cut my logs in December, January, and then inoculate in the spring. I know we inoculate in the fall, at the Mycelium Mysteries. That isn't my favorite, but we do it because we want people to learn about inoculation. So, but if those logs were sitting for over a year, I would use them as firewood, just because other things have probably gotten into them. Or you can let them grow and see what comes out. It might be turkey tail, and turkey tail is a great mushroom in and of itself. So,
Right, it's
but
a great medicinal mushroom, and yeah,
because it's so aggressive, it actually makes a really good medicinal.
right.
That's a whole conversation in and of itself.
Yes, we need to do. We have some workshops in our classroom on medicinal mushrooms. If anybody's interested in that topic, because that is a whole nother topic. So are there any poisonous mushrooms, Laura's asking, that could show up in your vegetable garden?
Yes. If you don't know your mushroom, don't eat it. Basically, um, there's a lot of little brown mushrooms. There's the death angel. There's the fly agaricus, and there's different ones that are definitely poisonous. Some that are maybe won't kill you, but they'll make you sick. But if you know you planted something, one of the reasons I'm a grower, I'm not a forager. I leave the foraging to other people who have more bandwidth than I do for learning. So for me, I have the mushrooms that I grow, the mushrooms I know, and I'm comfortable with the fact that I know a shiitake from something else. So that is important for you to know, what you planted and what it looks like, and different. I mean, again, at the conference, there's going to be a foraging, there's going to be an identification session. There's you've got that whole 1 day training for identification. Yeah, that's really a good place to learn to ID. And there's some key strategies for identification that you'll need to learn. Once you have those down, we don't have time to go into it today, but that's when you're going to be able to be confident of what you have in your garden versus if it's not that, then not to eat it, but or you may be able to identify it, and it may be edible, but but you need to be 100% sure. 99% is not good enough.
No, 100%, because there are old mushroom hunters, there are bold mushroom hunters, no old bold mushroom hunters. So you want to
So
be
yeah,
100% sure. And it's really fun to learn to identify mushrooms, and there are lots of, if you're not in our area, there's lots of mycological associations that you can connect with and go on forays. And we have forays all throughout the whole entire weekend at Mycelium Mysteries. And we have workshops specifically on even beginning, intermediate, and advanced identification. So I really encourage people to check that out. And not only do we have them live at our conference, we also have those workshops online in our women's herbal classroom. So then how do you keep your logs from touching the ground? Da, 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 da. We're going to drum roll. Go ahead. How do you
so
do that,
basic.
Ingrid?
I use pallets, and so I basically cut my logs and put them on pallets. If you don't have a pallet, if you have other wood, basically in the forest, what I would do is I would have a longer log, and I would put two of them, and then I would put all of my logs, Lincoln log, kind of next to each other on another log. They could be close to the ground. I just don't want them touching the ground. Um, Close to the ground is nice because that's where it's most humid. And so you don't want to dry your logs out, especially while you're waiting for them to be inoculated. And then the other thing that you need to be aware of is the reason we cut them in the winter and we don't inoculate them until several months later is the tree needs to know it's dead. It needs to be live so that it's not contaminated. But then by the time we inoculate it, it has to know that it's dead, because otherwise it will sterilize, the log will sterilize whatever spawn you put in it. So there's a hygiene issue, there's a timing issue. So come to my pre-workshop. But there's a lot to that part. You just don't want to just find a log anywhere and inoculate it. And so by cutting it in the winter, cutting the trees in the winter, usually the ground is frozen. There's usually snow on the ground, except lately. And so that protects the log also from being contaminated, so that you have a window where it can be on the ground, but you don't want it to be on the ground, once the snow melts and the ground thaws and things like that. So, and when my students take one log home, I always tell them, I said, if you have a brick or a small 2x4, take the two pieces, set it down, and then set the log on it. And then, it's off the ground, but it's close to the ground. Is that enough information, or did you need more?
Yes, but Tiffany wanted to know to piggyback on that. If a shiitake log has dried out, is it recoverable at all?
So yes and no. So it depends on how long it's dried out, because the mycelium does not like to dry out, but a mycelium will draw itself back into the log to protect itself from dying and from drying out. So somewhere in that log, the mycelium is probably still alive if it hasn't dried out completely. So the trick to that then is if you only have one log, get a bucket, put one end of the log in the one end, 12 hours, 24 hours, and then turn it over, let the capillary action from the other end, and rehydrate that log. Now, it's going to take a lot longer for it to fruit, because that mycelium, needs to recolonize the log. So, be patient. But having good hygiene and taking good care of your log all the way along is the key. So making sure it has enough water throughout the year. Last year we had a drought and I was watering my logs. I had a little tuna can, and I would sprinkle. And when the tuna can was full, I knew that it was an inch of water. And then, I kind of figured that that was enough for my logs.
So you were using the can as a rain gauge.
As a rain gauge. Yeah, just putting it right next to my log and then sprinkling it. And when it was full, I knew that, that's the equivalent of an inch of rain. So that's important, not in direct sunlight, but, don't want to put it somewhere where you're going to set it and forget it. And then also having the log out of the wind, direct wind and stuff, because wind will dry it out. So there's some
And
technique.
last question from the crowd. Thank you for everybody for all these questions. Is what do you do when something eats your plugs?
Yeah, that's not a fun thing. That's one of the reasons we use the cheese wax instead of the beeswax and other things. We hope that, they don't eat it until the mycelium has colonized the log. Once it's been colonized, it's not as big of a deal. The holes, though, do act as areas where it can dry out. So if you've got more wax or you've got something that you can plug, that hole with, plug it. If it happens right away, that's not a good thing. But if it happens a year down the road, the mycelium have probably done a pretty good job of colonizing the log. And I wouldn't worry about it too much if it's only one or two holes. But yeah, the mice, and sometimes they do like to eat the plugs. But that's why we use the cheese wax instead of like things like beeswax and things. Because beeswax the mice love it. Even the cheese wax they will eat, but it's a little bit less palatable than the beeswax. But
All
yeah,
right. So we've covered so many topics. And so I just want to mention, and if you want more, you can see Ingrid is a wealth of knowledge on this topic. And she's going to be teaching the inoculation workshop, 3-hour pre-conference workshop at Mycelium Mysteries. If you're able to come out to that, we'd love to see you there. She will also be teaching an overview of mushrooms and all the topics that you need to know in order to engage, even with the conference. Early on, she'll be teaching that, so you kind of know all the different areas. She'll also be doing an inoculation station during the open time, and everybody will have a chance who wants to inoculate a shiitake log and learn more there. And are you doing anything else, Ingrid? That's a lot, but
yeah, I think I'm doing the deep dive on shiitake too, right?
oh yes, she's doing a workshop on deep dive and really taking a deep dive into shiitake mushrooms. It'll be, I'm sure, from cultivating all the way to the nutritional and nourishing value, and I'm sure the history and all of that stuff, because of course she is a wealth of knowledge about that. I mean, as you can see, we could go into each of these topics for hours at a time. That's why I say, that you never get bored with the topic of mushrooms. It's always something new. So Ingrid, I was hoping, I know you've been teaching for Mycelium Mysteries since the beginning. We're the only women's mushroom conference in the world. It's a pretty special place. I'm wondering if you could just say a couple words about why you really appreciate this space and why you keep coming back and teaching there.
Oh God, there's just a lot of reasons. I really enjoy it. It's a smaller conference, smaller venue. It's more intimate. Um, I learn at the conference every year that I go from all the other women who are a wealth of information. There's and everybody shares. It's a very nurturing and sharing environment, and people are not egotistical there about, oh, my stuff, my ego. It's like, oh no, I learned this, and here it is. Here's what I learned, and if it can help you, then here it is. Go with it, and pass it on. I mean, the whole idea of the mycelial work is so evident at the conference, in that we're networking with each other, we're sharing, and I as much as I teach, I also learn. And every year I learn more and more, and it's a great. I look forward to seeing some of the teachers over and over again. It's my chance to to be in a nurturing environment. I mean, our world is not a nurturing place anymore, and to be able to spend a couple of days with women who are just so excited to learn and to share and be present for those couple of days is an amazing experience. And I love going to it. And I appreciate being asked to teach every year. So
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for holding the space with us and for being willing to have this conversation and share some of your knowledge here. And everybody, you can see how there's so much more. And, we've been doing the conference now for 9 years. And, I too learn every single time I go, and there's just always more. So I'm so excited to be there with you, Ingrid. And again, thank you for being here and sharing your knowledge and wisdom. And we'll share contact information and resources as a follow-up. And I'm going to hand it over to Shari, who's going to kind of close things for us. And she will also do the giveaways. So if people want to stick around for that, that would be wonderful. So thank you. Thank you, Ingrid. Appreciate you so much.
well, thanks for the opportunity. And like I said, it was, you know, every topic that we went on could have been another whole hour.
I know. It's so true. So true. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, thank you. And thanks, Ingrid, and thanks, Linda. We appreciate all the information. And yeah, I learned a couple of things as well. And I've got a whole list of notes here. I like the real simple tip of storing mushrooms in a paper bag. I think that was really a key thing. And I liked the definition of the agroforestry. That was interesting to learn about. So and as Linda stated, Ingrid's going to be teaching a free time where you can inoculate a shiitake log, which is what we were talking about towards the end there. You can learn about what those plugs were, things like that. There's also a free time activity where you can make a bag for oysters and take that home and grow some oysters at home. As Linda touched on, beginner ID, intermediate ID. We also have a fabulous ID table that Sarah Fultz Jordan does every year, where you can learn about all kinds of different mushrooms. We have topics on women's traditions. So do take a look at the workshops. We'll put the link in the chat for that. And yeah, so the favorite part, or one of my favorite parts of the evening, is to pick some of the winners. And one thing we have, and we'll include a link to purchase this if you're not the winner tonight, is a mushroom apron. So it has Mycelium Mysteries on it and a nice sketch of a lot of mushrooms. And so we're going to give away a mushroom apron. And so I see Sue McCoy. So Sue, what we're going to ask for all of the winners tonight is send an email to herbwomen@gmail.com. So Sue, you've won that mushroom apron. So send an email to herbwomen@gmail.com and we'll connect you with that. The next thing is we're giving away one of the modules in our Herb Women classroom. And I'm going to pop this in the chat right now. Here is the fungal fundamentals. This is a part 1. And tonight we're giving away part 2, and I'm just popping that in as well. I think when we had the most recent community conversation with Barbara Batakova, that we gave away that fungal fundamentals 1. And then tonight we're giving away fungal fundamentals 2. So this is online coursework that you can do at your own pace. And if you get registered quickly for that, you can attend tomorrow's Q&A session with Linda, because you'll be part of that Herb Women
Shari,
classroom.
how many workshops are in each of those modules?
Let me look here. I just had that up. More fungal. There's 8 lessons in there. So there's a yoga. You can learn to move like a mushroom. The future is fungi and female. There's a panel discussion from the 2021 Mycelium Mysteries Conference. So that featured Juliana Farchi. And who was the woman we had from Israel who talked about
Eleanor.
Eleanor talked about truffles in the desert. That was fascinating. So Rebecca Chandler talks about keying out mushrooms. If you don't know what that is, that's doing like if there's a gill that's attached, you go to 1. If it's not attached, you go to 2. And that's how you go through and identify. Fungi in the Feminine with Sonia Horowitz. There's a Lion's Mane with Gina Rivers. Barbara Ching is teaching mushrooms, tea, broths, and textures. And then there's a clinical practice with Cornelia Cho. So there's a wide variety of topics. So 8 or 9 lessons in each of those modules. So, all right. I didn't give it away yet, did I? I got some.
Nope,
No.
All
you didn't.
right.
I sidetracked you, but I just think it's interesting to hear how many different topics get covered in the modules. Like, it's going to go more in depth, like an hour and a half on each of those topics, which
Right.
is demonstrated tonight. Well, how much that and more is needed.
Yep. And I think we mentioned Turkey Tail tonight, and Gina Rivers is teaching a 1.5 hour workshop on Turkey Tail at the fall conference. So, all right. Bonnie Jones. So I'm looking at Bonnie Jones. We're going to give you that Fungal Fundamentals 2. So you've won that. So if you want to send an email to, yay, Bonnie, if you want to send an email to herbwomen@gmail.com. Now, for the grand finale, the pièce de résistance, the introduction to mushroom cultivation with Ingrid. So this is taking place on Friday morning, the 19th. And do I have that right? Is it Friday morning? Or unless it's Thursday. Let me double check my program here. I want to be accurate.
It is Friday morning.
It is Friday morning. Okay, great. So we would like you, if you're able to attend in person, if you want to turn your camera on, find that little react button and raise your hand. And if you can't find that button, raise your physical hand. So I see Heather's hand is up. So I'm going to give you all a minute. Go ahead, put your hand up. I see a couple in-person hands. That's great. So keep your hands up. If you can attend in person, we're going to give that away. So, all right, here we go. I'm looking at Donna Koronek. Donna. Donna, you can attend that pre-conference workshop with Ingrid. And we're going to put some follow-ups in with some emails, with some discounts, highlighting some of these other courses. We'll put 2 of our most recent community conversations. One was with Barbara Bodakova, and the other was with Alyssa Allen. And Alyssa is teaching a pre-conference on mushroom dyeing, which is sold out. We've added a post-conference, and she's teaching 2 workshops in the midst of the weekend as well on mushroom dyeing. So you'll be able to dye a
And
scarf.
those workshops are on fiber dyeing with mushrooms, not dyeing with mushrooms.
Thanks for putting that out. DYE, dyeing
Mm.
fabric. So we'll put those in the link or in the email follow-up. You can watch those 2 community conversations and learn more about what those women are teaching and speaking on at the Mycelium Mysteries. So thank you, everybody. Before we all sign off, if you want to unmute and say thank you, yeah, look for our emails coming up. We'll send everybody a replay in a few days. And thank you again, Ingrid, and thank you, Linda. Thank you, Courtney, and to the rest of the Midwest Women's Herbal team. Thank you, everybody, and good night. And go ahead and
Thank you.
See
Good
you
night.
live.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
It was great to see
Thank
you.
you.
Thank
See you
you.
down the
Thank
road.
you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. Good night. Good night. Thanks, everybody.